In World of Warcraft's lore, there are certain times where things occur that give rise to huge controversy, whether if it's due to the fact that the event is plain out confusing, which leads to debates and theories trying to explain that event, or if something a character did was considered right or wrong, depending on your outlook. In other times, it may just be that some of the lore contradicts each other, which leads many people to ask the question, what is right? In today's video, we will go over 3 controversial moments in World of Warcraft's lore. Number 3, Darion, Mograine, and the Death Knights. Now, if you play a Death Knight or have at least made one and have done the starting zone, then you know that these soldiers of undeath were once under the control of the Lich King. What made this quest arc so amazing was that you actually got the opportunity to serve the Lich King and play as the bad guy, before ultimately becoming a Benedict Arnold and turncoating to the Alliance or the Horde. However, this then begs a huge question that many fans had ever since it hit live back during Wrath. How the hell did the Death Knights break off from the control of the Lich King? One of the only significant instances of this happening was when Sylvanas broke off from the control of Arthas, but this was only done when Ner'Zhul was losing his power and his hold over the undead was weakening. At the time of Darion and the Death Knights turning away from the Scourge, the Lich King was at full power. So why is it then that the Death Knights magically were able to turn away from their enslavement under the Lich King? Well, the way it paints it in game is that pretty much it was all based on the strength of willpower. Darion and the Death Knights had no problem serving the Lich King until the Ashbringer refused to strike down the living. Once the light overpowered the Death Knights, an image of Alexandros Mograine appears and reminds Darion of who he was in life. Before the reunion could be completed though, the Lich King appears and captures Alexandros' essence, as well as revealing to Darion that he sent in all of the Death Knights to die just so that he could lure out Tyrion Fordring. It was at this time that Darion threw the Ashbringer to Tyrion, who caught the blade and struck Arthas, causing him to retreat. But if Darion somehow was able to break hold of the Lich King surely through pure will, then how come the other Death Knights were able to break off from the Lich King as well? They didn't give a rat's ass about Alexandros or no Ashbringer, so how did all of them just decide, screw you Arthas, if you won't give me a raise, I'm not gonna work for you anymore. It's quite a loophole that causes many debates and should definitely be touched up upon, because if any one creature can just decide to leave the service of the Lich King, then the Scourge would literally only be composed of nothing but the Cult of the Damned. You think a Nubarak willingly serves the Lich King? Absolutely not. Number 2, the Bombing of Theramore. You can't have a video showcasing controversial events in WoW's lore without bringing up Garrosh and Theramore. Let's be honest. Now, when this event happened, people were completely split on their stances. Some state that Garrosh was completely in the right and that he did what was necessary in order to strengthen the Horde, while others saw him as a bloodthirsty warmonger who would stir up nothing but trouble. The main issue that people saw with this act was that Garrosh dropped the mana bomb on the city, which is an act of cowardice and dishonor since he rained death down from the skies with no way for his enemies to defend themselves aside from Ronin sacrificing himself, which still nonetheless only limited the damage. On the other hand, however, you can also argue that Garrosh wasn't a coward because he did actually march the Horde into the city to assault the Alliance just before he gave the order to drop the bomb. He gave them blood and glory before raining death down from the skies, and he was also on the front lines while doing this. This is a pretty sensitive topic with many people taking extreme stances regarding both sides. I can personally argue for both if you put me on the spotlight for either side. I don't really have a problem with this event. Looking at it as both a Horde player since BC and now an Alliance player, I personally think it's fair game. The only issue that I really found to be a huge problem here was how the Horde captured Theramore citizens who either were taken at sea or captured in Dustwallow Marsh following the bombing of Theramore. Now, in Siege of Orgrimmar, you can see those captives being strung up and locked in cages while being tortured or just straight up killed, which I can definitely say is messed up, especially since Garrosh had his whole speech with Cromgar about honor and how torturing these civilians and killing them would bring nothing to the war effort. Seems like he has selective memory when it comes to honor. Number 1, Arthas consuming Ner'Zhul. This one isn't controversial in the sense that people argue about right or wrong. Instead, it's controversial because there's so much conflicting information which leads to debates. When Arthas took up the helm of domination and merged with Ner'Zhul atop the Frozen Throne, we see that he has entered a dormant state. However, he wasn't just sleeping in his chair that whole time with saliva dripping on his chin. While in this sleeping state, he was actually dreaming, and while he was dreaming, Arthas saw a vision with himself and 2 other people. One was Ner'Zhul and the other was a young but ill boy. It was the good and evil within Arthas. The boy was a younger version of him that represented the good that he had before he became consumed by his vengeance, while the evil was represented in Ner'Zhul. The boy pleaded with Arthas to turn back from his path and told him that it wasn't too late to be redeemed, only to have Arthas respond by running him through with Frostmourne. It was then that Ner'Zhul was thrilled at the fact that Arthas had eradicated the last bit of humanity inside of him and stated that now they can truly be one entity. But in that instant, Arthas also impaled Ner'Zhul with Frostmourne, making himself the dominant entity within the Lich King, ultimately meaning that he was in full control of all of his actions in wrath. Now, here's where the problem arises. In-game, there's a lot of evidence that points to the contrary. In the Halls of Reflection, Uther states that he believes that the only reason the Scourge hasn't washed over us already is because Arthas is holding him back. Why would he hold them back if he was the dominant presence and started all of this to begin with? Also, as we quest, we also hear the Lich King say that he was once a shaman. Arthas definitely was never a shaman, and if Ner'Zhul was consumed by Arthas, then the Lich King would have never said this. Also, at the end of the Shadowmourne questline, players can give Jaina her locket, which Arthas had kept with him. When you give this to her, she states that she always knew that a piece of him remained within the Lich King. If he was in full control and wanted to wage complete war on the living, then why would he hold onto this locket that belonged to Jaina, who is still living? Also, in the final cutscene, we hear Arthas say,
"Father, is it over?"
Unless he was just like, ah shit, I lost, might as well make it look like I was mind controlled this whole time, Arthas wouldn't have said this. Even though the book says that Arthas is the dominant presence within the Lich King, there's a lot of evidence that points otherwise, which is why so many players debate as to who was truly the being responsible for the war in the Frozen Wastes. Thanks so much for watching this video, guys. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos like this in the future, and until next time, I will see you all later.